Welcome to this presentation entitled Public Places in Madiba's Memory, Using Archival Resources for Graphic Heritage Interventions in Urban Development. The presentation is part of the Repositioning Pasts, Visioning Futures conference in December 2022. The research reported here is part of a larger study into how places named after Nelson Mandela communicate something about him. The work is part of the Newton Fund project Repositioning Graphic Heritage and reflects recent discussions with Nelson Mandela Foundation in Johannesburg about the opportunities for using graphic heritage associated with Mandela in urban development. We should note that in South Africa, Mandela is more often referred to as Madiba. The project team undertaking this work is comprised of Robert Harland, a reader in urban graphic heritage at Loughborough University in the UK, Yolandi Berger, a research fellow also at Loughborough University but based in South Africa, and Everard Berger, a lecturer at the Department of Civil Engineering at Tshwane University in South Africa. The presentation will be narrated by three of us, focused on different sections to reflect our respective expertise. The presentation will be structured in 5 parts that will clarify some terminology and provide a basic overview of our research perspective. Then, we will frame some thoughts about past, present and future that will briefly include the UK's response to apartheid in the 1980s, the naming of Nelson Mandela Park in the city of Leicester in the East Midlands region of the UK, and the opportunity for graphic heritage intervention in that park. First, let's clarify some terminology. For the purpose of this presentation, what we mean by graphic heritage is drawn from the nature of the graphic image, as suggested by Mitchell in his work on iconology. He suggests graphic images to be pictures, statues, architectural imagery, or designs, and these may be abstract, non-representational, ornamental, structural designs, diagrams, even graphs. We simply propose utilizing this range in the service of cultural heritage to provide a working definition of what graphic heritage might be.
As Rob has mentioned, our research is focused on places named in honor of Mr. Nelson Mandela, also locals call him Madiba. He was born on 18 July 1918 and served the South African people until his death in 2013. He was an anti-apartheid activist who was elected as the president of the African National Congress political party before the first democratic election in the country. In 1994, Madiba was elected as the first president of post-apartheid South Africa. Upon the end of term in office in 1999, he founded the Nelson Mandela Foundation. His life was dedicated to serving his country and its rainbow nation for 67 years. Therefore, the South African people dedicate 67 minutes annually on his birthday for the greater good. If you're not familiar with this iconic legend, here is a photograph of Nelson Mandela so that you know who we are talking about throughout our presentation.
Our research perspective is drawn from graphic design and what John Ziesel refers to as design inquiry. Our perspective aligns with Nelson and Stolterman's discussion about systemics in their book The Design Way. They suggest that what and how we see things is determined by a number of cognitive influences. Our cognitive influences are drawn from a design continuum, that links the micro concerns of type and typographic design with the macro concerns of urban design. Our graphic design perspective sits in the middle, and it's from this that we embrace Mitchell's notion of graphic images, as previously noted. We also draw from John Ziesel's work on design inquiry. Our approach is framed by observation, photo documentation, and other recording devices such as drawings and annotated diagrams. Through this, we look for physical traces that determine byproducts of use and displays of self, as revealed through official, unofficial, and illegitimate public messages. Now that we've provided you with a sense of our approach to research in this project, the next section will briefly outline the UK's response to apartheid in the 1980s. This will provide some indication about why a former recreation ground in the middle of Leicester came to be named after Nelson Mandela. To remind you of the circumstances of Mandela in the 1980s, he was in Pollsmoor Prison in Cape Town. At the same time, South Africa was exposed to stiff international sanctions due to apartheid, and the UK called for his release. Here you can see some of the posters at the time that form some of the legacy of the era in graphic heritage form. To give some idea about the public reaction to Mandela's imprisonment, you might listen to the Special AKA's song called Free Nelson Mandela in 1984, which became an international hit for the UK band. Even now, the song continues to have great appeal for its work attracting so many to the anti-apartheid movement. And further, the movement organised a birthday tribute to Mandela in 1988 at London's Wembley Stadium, attended by 72,000 people. Some of the graphic heritage associated with these initiatives can be viewed on screen. Such was the public mood in the UK in the 1980s that in Leicester, an open space called Welford Road Recreation Ground, an established site for pop festivals, was renamed Nelson Mandela Park on 6 August 1986. This photograph from the local Leicester Mercury newspaper in 1969 provides some indication of the ground's location and the place that would become a commemoration to Mandela.
Several hundred places around the world are named after Mandela. The Nelson Mandela Foundation provides an indicative number of 163 streets, 50 buildings, 24 gardens, 7 neighborhoods, 9 bridges, 17 squares, 64 schools, 56 universities or educational institutions, and 1 hospital, which can be added to the naming of highways, sports stadiums, plazas, parks, and statues. As mentioned in the previous slide, an early example of a place named in Madiba's honor is Nelson Mandela Park in the city of Leicester. The city of Leicester is situated in the county of Leicestershire in the East Midlands in the United Kingdom.
This image shows the location of the park and the surrounding areas in the city centre of Leicester. The planning process of a city takes place in different time frames over several decades or even more. Often the urban planner is only involved for a short period of time. However, it's required to design for a long term. The unique mixed land use area of the park is such an example since the city has ancient roots in the early 1st century. The park is situated in an area with residential housing, a public hospital, a local prison, institutions for higher education, hotels, and a large sports stadium. The unique context stood out for South African researchers since it's not common mixed land use in South Africa. This slide shows the unique mixed land use of the surrounding areas of Nelson Mandela Park, Leicester. Firstly, the Leicester Royal Infirmary Hospital was constructed in 1771, followed by the Leicester Prison, which was built in 1825. The conservation area, the railway line and the rugby stadium was built after this in the 1800s. In the early 1900s, the Leicester Fire Station was built, and just recently the Hotel Brooklyn Leicester was built in 2021. While this was all happening, commercial spaces and residential housing was built simultaneously. The annotated diagram indicates the location of several points of interest in and around the park itself. Please feel free to pause the presentation here to investigate the legend of the maps for more detail.
The park was documented in 2021 by the research team during one of the waves of the COVID-19 pandemic. Although the photographs portray no people, there was a lot of activity happening in this space, since the park has a variety of activities that the community can engage with. There is an outdoor gym on the side of the green space, which the Leicester Tigers often use for informal rugby practice. In 2020, the new two-way cycle track through the park was completed. It provides a direct link for cyclists to and from the city centre. In 2022, the Leicester City Council announced further improvements of the cycle track in this area. The children's play area is also used daily, and as such, the children have left informal pathways between the various play equipment, which we documented as erosions according to Zeisel's design inquiry framework. The basketball court is situated next to the prison wall, and locals often use the court for practice and informal games. The park also has common amenities such as public toilets and defibrillators.
This is the north view of the park. The red arrow indicates the location of the Leicester Prison, which is barely visible in the photograph. You can also observe the green open space with goalposts that Yolandi mentioned earlier. This is the south view looking towards the park. This is such an interesting photograph since it portrays how a street is used to divide between the prison, indicated in red, and the residential housing, indicated in blue. The purple arrow at the top is the top of the Welford Sports Stadium, which is the home of the Leicester Tigers rugby team. The east view shows the Opal Court student accommodation in the background at the red arrow. At the purple arrow is an official park sign, and opposite to it is a blue arrow to the outdoor gym. The park is lined with trees on both sides of the walkway and provides a bit of greenery in the midst of the city centre. The west view shows the two-way cycle track that Yolandi mentioned earlier that goes through the park. The red arrow shows the location of the Royal Infirmary Hospital, and the purple arrow to the left the Welford Sports Stadium. At the blue arrow you can see the residential housing areas with one of the towers of the prison just in view.
In the screen grab in the slide from Poolcar News, we see Leicester residents paying tribute to Madiba in Nelson Mandela Park upon his death in 2013. Leicester Cathedral, Leicester City Council and various faith organisations of the city joined together that afternoon for thanksgiving and tributes to the late Madiba. It started off with a gathering in Nelson Mandela Park, followed by a walk by young people through the city centre. The Thanksgiving service for the life and legacy of Nelson Mandela began at the Nelson Mandela Park, featuring poetry and readings containing Mandela's most inspirational quotes and messages. The Deputy Mayor of that time, Mr. Rory Palmer, also paid tribute to the legacy and link that Mandela had with the city. He said that Leicester has a strong relationship with a figure such as Nelson Mandela, who meant so much to people who believe in genuine equality. It is interesting to note what the community says about the park from their reviews on Google Maps. The park has a 4.1 star rating on Google Maps and received 528 reviews in total. The oldest review was written 9 years ago and the newest only a few days ago. Reviews include photographs of people's interaction with the park facilities and local wildlife. Walking is the most mentioned activity, followed by access to public toilets. 2 reviews are highlighted in this slide. The wild spray mentioned by Siddharth Dumbre is an example of illegal messages, according to Zeisel's Design Inquiry Framework. The review of Mary Jones highlights a missed opportunity in the park with a Gandhi statue instead of a Nelson Mandela one.
In April 2021, we visited Nelson Mandela Park in Leicester to see what we could learn about the great man with a park named after him in the middle of this mid-sized city. We found many examples of the park name on pedestrian signage, bus routes, entrance structures, notice boards, and welcome addresses that included quotations from Mandela. These confirm not only how well the park is known, but also the accessibility of the location that still fulfills its recreation ground objective, but has also become a community resource if the information posted on the notice board is anything to go by. These are all inherently graphic in their appearance. The only information about Madiba, beyond his name on bus shelters and previously noted structures, is to be found on this bronze-coloured plaque mounted on a large rock. It occupies a central place in the park, near the children's playground equipment. The plaque, which is very difficult to read, provides a summary of Mandela's life and replaced an original plaque that suggested the official naming of the park as 1989 rather than 1986. Based on this lack of information about Mandela, we wondered what opportunity there might be for future graphic interventions in the park to celebrate Mandela's life and work. Our research discovered public interest in commissioning a statue of Madiba in the city of Leicester. The Nelson Mandela Community Programme have previously tried to raise capital to fund a memorial. As stated here, the statue would be a focal point for the rich and diverse people of all colours, cultures and multi-faith of Leicester for inspiration to live in peaceful harmony, share and enjoy each other's wealth of knowledge, activities, events and what it means to be human. This is in contrast to a petition to remove a statue of Mahatma Gandhi in the city because of his well-documented anti-black racism. That petition attracted 5,000 signatures. One overlooked opportunity to enhance Madiba's presence in the park would have been as part of this proposed scheme to redevelop the park as part of a new hotel complex next to the Leicester Tigers rugby stadium. This would have involved a new landscaped pedestrian approach to the ground running through the park. It would cross an area of green space currently used as a rugby pitch and would form a route through the centre as an alternative to the existing path around the edge. Had the project proposal embraced the opportunity to say more about Madiba in the park, for example, through public art interventions, the £22 million scheme may have been more favourably considered by the city's mayor. Our view, as stated here, is that the site allows for opportunities, exploration, and speculation about future graphic interventions about Madiba as the area is redeveloped to meet the emerging needs of the city.
Members of the research team visited the Nelson Mandela Foundation archive on 20 September 2022 to meet the archive team with whom we have been liaising since 2021. The team gave us a personal tour of the physical archive, which is rich in visual resources. All physical resources are also available on the digital archive of the Foundation's website. The research methodology proposes the use of the public archive of the Foundation as a creative resource to provide insight into how graphic heritage interventions of the past and present may enhance future tributes to Mandela in public places. The Nelson Mandela Foundation has a formal procedure in place for the naming of places in honor of Madiba. The institution needs to apply in writing to the Foundation, after which the Foundation assesses the request based on evidence of direct historical linkage, direct or indirect commercial intention, and geographical proximity in relation to other sites. Once the Foundation completes the assessment and decides to grant permission, a code of conduct will be signed. The Code of Conduct is an internal document that is used to govern grant permission to use the name of Madiba.
Many places named after Nelson Mandela don't display any graphic images of him at all. Others are abundant in their commemoration, such as Nelson Mandela Square at Sandton. By comparison, we've undertaken a study at Nelson Mandela Park in Mamelodi, South Africa, where there is nothing but 2 welcome signboards. We believe this is a missed opportunity and are currently working with local creative industry partners such as the video and photo documentation maker Celeste Mackenzie and the digital design firm Black Box to explore how digital technology can enrich places named after Nelson Mandela for the benefit of education and heritage tourism. To draw out some conclusion or proposed way forward for this research, our findings envision design guidelines for future graphic heritage interventions to enhance the association between public places named in Madiba's honour and visitors to those locations, as well as to provide insight into the intrinsic collaboration process between stakeholders. Thank you for listening, and please follow this link should you want to know more about our research. We also express our gratitude to Razia Sella, Zandile Mieke, and Heather Enrique at Nelson Mandela Foundation.